It's well known throughout the cycling community that Walmart cuts costs by using cheaper materials to keep their prices low. To a non-cycling enthusiast, these bikes seem to be a more reasonably priced alternative to their bike shop counterparts. So this brings up the question, is Walmart's reputation merited? And how would a Walmart bike survive on a real trail? Well, to find out, I took a trip down to my local Walmart. This is a Huffy Carnage. It's a full suspension fat tire mountain bike that cost me $179. Now, I have to be honest, Huffy did a good job making a great looking bike and keeping up with the latest mountain bike trends. They did such a good job that most people didn't realize that this bike was a Huffy until I mentioned it. On the other hand, this bike weighs 55 pounds, the fork already had a little play, and the brakes weren't set up properly. I did a quick tune-up of the bike to make sure the handlebars, stem, and other components were tight. And after a rigorous parking lot test full of skids, wheelies, and bouncies, it was time to see if the Huffy Carnage lived up to its name. Now, I should mention, I have a lot of experience riding bikes in places they weren't intended to be ridden, but for some reason riding a bike of unknown quality down dangerous terrain made me a little uneasy. When I got to the top, I was starting to get a little nervous, and the better half of me was telling me this might be a bad idea. But to satisfy your viewing pleasure, I'll take one for the team, so just sit back and enjoy the show. We'll see how far I make it. Oh god! Woo! Even though the bike sounded like loose change and the fork felt like a jackhammer, the fat tires made for a pretty comfortable ride. They largely made up for the lack of real suspension and dampened the roughness of the trail, which came in handy since the brakes weren't exactly doing their job.
Just make a left onto this black trail. It'll get a little gnarly up here.
Woohoo! By the time I had gone halfway down, I had already worn through half of the brake pads, and in David's words,
"It smells like burning rubber. It smelled like a truck tire blew up."
From here on down, the trail consisted of big jumps up to 35 feet in length. On my downhill race bike, this should be smooth sailing, but on this bike, it was a slightly different story. Even though I had thoroughly tightened the handlebars, 2 bolts was not nearly enough to prevent the bars from moving. This in turn caused me to crash. To be honest, I was expecting to crash, but not on the easiest part of the trail. At this point, the bars had become loose and they were also completely bent. The fork was leaking oil and also twisted. The front brake had mysteriously stopped working and the back brake wasn't particularly useful. Now, a smarter person would have seen the writing on the wall and decided to walk the rest of the way down, but I was determined and wanted to see just how far I could push my luck. Maybe I shouldn't do anything stupid. I headed back down cautiously. I had to keep rotating the bars, which added a challenging element to the ride. I was also slightly worried that a big impact from landing a jump might snap the handlebars. Lower down the trail, things started to get a little hairy. Both brakes had completely stopped working and I was going much faster than I was comfortable with given the circumstances. Come on brakes, do your thing! I'm pulling my brakes as hard as I can and I can't slow down. At this point, I couldn't slow down, so I had no choice but to commit to the jumps. I even started clearing a few. After a few close calls and soiled undergarments, I'd finally emerged from the woods. I have never been so happy in my life to reach the bottom of a trail. So what's the verdict? Well, the Huffy Carnage definitely lived up to its name. But overall, for the price, it's hard for me to hate this bike. I mean, this bike did mostly survive a run down a double black diamond mountain bike trail, something I don't think this bike was designed to handle. Even though this bike said it was trail rated, I don't think Huffy had this in mind. Now, I definitely don't recommend going out and buying this bike. With that being said, for the price range, it is a pretty cool little bike, and I definitely had fun riding it. Now, if you're seriously thinking about getting into mountain biking, I would highly recommend spending a little bit more money on something that was designed for handling this kind of abuse. If you want to see the full helmet cam run of this video, I'll leave that in the description below. If you were wondering, yes, this video was inspired by my friend Seth Bike Hacks, who did a similar video on a Walmart bike. I'll also leave a link to his videos in the description below. And lastly, I want to give a huge thanks to my friend David Kahn for following me and filming me as I went down the mountain on this contraption. As always, my name is Phil Metz. Thanks for playing bikes with me today, and I'll see you next time.